What if your childhood wasn't measured in memories, but in pounds every morning? The number on a scale decided your fate. This is the story of how we turned starvation into strategy and silence into revolution. Let's begin the narrative now. They say the first time you recognize the shape of your prison, it's too late to escape it quietly. For me, it wasn't the locked doors or the echo of keys. It was the sound of my mother thanking my father through cracked, bleeding lips, thanking him for keeping her beautiful after 3 days without food. I was only 8 when I watched her emerge from the punishment room, hollow and swaying like a ghost that hadn't been fully summoned back. Her skin looked translucent in the hallway light, and her smile, brittle as sun-bleached bone, was aimed at the man who'd put her there. And in my young mind, I didn't register it as cruelty. I thought it was care. I thought that was just love's sharp edge. By 15, I had seen things no child should associate with love. I watched my older sister collapse in the hallway because she had only water and anxiety to feed on for 2 days. I caught my younger cousin crying while sneaking drops of water from the bathroom tap, trembling hands cupped under the faucet like she was stealing gold. My aunt, always elegant, always quiet, taught her daughter how to vomit discreetly after dinner, how to cry only behind locked bathroom doors. The rules were clear. In our family, women weighed themselves in front of the men at 6 o'clock sharp, barefoot, in nightgowns, eyes down. If your weight increased, even by a fraction of a pound, you were escorted silently to the empty room with no food, no lights, and no end in sight. Pregnancy gave you a pass, but only for 6 weeks postpartum. After that, if you hadn't shrunk back to your wedding weight, you were locked up again. We didn't speak about the room. We didn't say its name. But everyone knew its hunger. The boys in the family, they ate steak. They laughed over pancakes and butter. They had no curfews, no scales. They watched sports while we picked at salads with trembling forks, calculating every bite like it held our futures. To them, we were ornaments, and ornaments needed maintenance. Then came wrestling season at school, a curious salvation wrapped in sweat and vinyl mats. The boys in my gym class knew how to drop 5 pounds in a night. Water tricks, caffeine pills, garbage bag saunas. They did it for competition. I learned to do it to survive. And once I mastered the technique, the timing, the dehydration, the way your body could fake thinness even when you'd eaten, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself. Not while my 12-year-old cousin sobbed herself to sleep from hunger, not while my sister's hair fell out in clumps every time she brushed it. So I created something disguised, a sanctuary in stitches. Every Thursday, I gathered the girls of our family in a circle of embroidery hoops and fabric scraps. We stitched quietly under the kitchen lights while the men watched TV. But between the threads, I whispered other lessons. How to use parsley tea to flush your system before weigh-ins. How to wake at 4 a.m. to sweat inside trash bags. How to add electrolyte packets after rehydrating without looking bloated. It became science, our own clandestine curriculum. And as we mastered the manipulation of our bodies, I taught them something deeper, how to record everything, how to photograph the scale, how to hide phones in the punishment rooms, how to capture the sound of a lock turning in the dark. We didn't know it then, but we were preparing for war. And 6 months later, it came, not with a shout, but with a mechanical scale. My uncle, never one to trust technology, bought an old-fashioned one, the kind you couldn't reprogram with magnets like we'd learned to do. That morning, the numbers betrayed us. Every woman stood 5 pounds heavier. The room went cold. One by one, we were dragged away. There weren't enough punishment rooms, so they locked us in closets, in the basement, in their idea of correction. But rebellion has a voice. And that voice came from my cousin, barely 13, but burning with courage. She screamed through her tears. We haven't gained weight. We faked it. We've been eating, and then, like a match, tossed into dry timber. She held up her phone. I've been live streaming for the last 10 minutes. Sirens answered her declaration. Red and blue lights painting the front of the house. Radios crackling with codes I didn't recognize. And for the first time in my life, I saw the men, our fathers, uncles, husbands, step back in fear. Not from us, but from truth made undeniable. And we knew then this wasn't just a family matter. It was evidence. It was a revolution. It had begun. When the police pulled up to our front door, I watched something shift in the men's posture. Not guilt, not shame, but calculation. My father, ever the polished speaker, stepped forward with the composure of a man presenting at a board meeting. "Officers," he said, straightening his tie, "this is a misunderstanding. We simply run a health-conscious household. These girls are exaggerating." Behind him, the others nodded like synchronized machines. "We promote wellness," my uncle added, "nothing more." But the officers had already seen the live stream. They'd heard the screams, seen the time-stamped footage, read the comments flooding in from strangers who recognized abuse dressed up in civility. They weren't buying it. Within an hour, Child Protective Services arrived, their presence marked not by sirens, but by quiet authority. They turned our living room into a triage center, unfolding portable partitions and ushering us, one by one, into makeshift interview rooms. I watched my sister go in, eyes sunken from weeks of deprivation, but back held straight as a sword. When she came out, her jaw trembled, but she didn't break. The social worker's expression told us everything. grim, furious, resolved. Meanwhile, the fathers retreated to the dining room like generals strategizing in a bunker. I could hear fragments through the walls. Spin the narrative. Meditation rooms. Voluntary. I didn't need to eavesdrop to know what they were planning. Reinvent the truth. Erase the damage. Cast us as hysterical girls misunderstanding tradition. That evening, a lawyer arrived. Immaculate suit. Leather briefcase. Voice like ice. He corralled the men into my father's study, and their muffled voices hummed through the vents until long past midnight. When they emerged, the script was set. There were no punishment rooms, only quiet retreats. The girls had keys. The locks were for privacy. Starvation dietary guidance. It was all love. Misunderstood. And then the intimidation began. My uncle slipped a note into my cousin's locker. Smart girls know when to stay quiet. He cornered my sister outside chemistry class. Eyes cold. Your mother's gone. Sent away to remember what loyalty means. Want to join her? Some girls cracked. Mothers pulled daughters from school, cloaking fear in the language of trauma. They're too upset to return. They told administrators, but we knew they weren't shielding their daughters. They were hiding their complicity. Still, we clung to the hope that our evidence, the months of digital logs, photos, weight charts, would hold. But when I tried to access the cloud, I felt the floor shift beneath me, empty, wiped clean, everything we'd built. Gone. I didn't have to guess. I found Brad in his room, his face pale, the glow of his monitor casting shadows across his guilt. My brother, the tech genius, the one who helped us set up hidden chats and encrypted folders, now avoiding my eyes. Dad knew, he muttered. He made me delete it. Said if I didn't, I could kiss college goodbye. I felt my lungs tighten. So you just erased us. I didn't want to, he whispered. But I can't lose everything. Everything you've worked for, I said, is built on our suffering. He didn't deny it, just sat there, silent, drowning in the cowardice he tried to dress up as survival. I turned to leave, but paused when I saw a folder on his desktop, labeled insurance, and I realized he hadn't erased it all. He was playing both sides. The next Thursday, only 4 of us showed up to our sewing circle. The room felt cavernous, our whisper swallowed by the emptiness. Peggy, just 11, tugged her embroidery hoop and said, "Maybe we should stop. My mom says we're breaking the family." The family was already broken. I told her, "We're just shining a light on the cracks." Then Margaret spoke, new to the circle, but sharp. My neighbor went through something like this. Not about weight. Control. She said the key was finding someone outside the family who'll listen. We'd tried that. Police, CPS, and now lawyers spinning fairy tales faster than we could shout the truth. But then my sister suggested something different. What about the school nurse, she said. She's a mandatory reporter. The idea ignited something in all of us. Not law enforcement, not courts, but the people who see us every day, the ones trained to notice bruises, exhaustion, fear. We crafted a new plan. Each girl would visit the nurse separately, describing our symptoms, the dizzy spells, the blackouts, the missed periods, all real, all evidence, and all hard to argue with once it lived in medical records. But our fathers were watching, closely, too closely. The next morning, my mother woke me with a whisper, not panic, but a trembling urgency. "Your father knows. He's pulling you and your sister out of school." I sat bolt upright. "If he does, we lose everything. The nurse, the counselors, anyone who could help." She looked away. "He already called." "You're withdrawn." "Then stop him." I begged. "You're our mother. You have rights." She flinched. I gave those up a long time ago. But something in her eyes had changed. Not fear. Something hotter. Angrier. That afternoon, while he was at work, she did the unthinkable, drove us to school herself. Her hands shook on the wheel. "If he asks, say you snuck out." I couldn't stop you. It was a tiny rebellion, but it was hers. I walked into the nurse's office with my heart pounding like I was entering a confession booth. "Mrs. Chen looked up, her brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" And for the first time, I told someone everything. The weigh-ins, the punishments, the rooms. When I finished, she said, "I'll file a report. But I need evidence. Real evidence. I thought of Brad's secret folders. The phones I'd hidden months ago. David's whispered confessions." I nodded. "I'll find it. Because if the war had begun with stitches and sweat, it would be won with proof and fire." When people think of abuse, they often picture bruises, screams, sirens. But our torment came dressed in linen, in polite smiles, in the scent of citrus cleaner and warm lighting. A curated facade so pristine it could seduce anyone into disbelief. But behind the woven curtains and family portraits was a machine, well-oiled, multi-generational, built to measure our worth in decimals and compliance. By the time I was 16, I had memorized every creak in the floorboards, every excuse that worked on teachers when I fainted midday from dehydration, In every way, my father disguised cruelty as discipline. He had a favorite phrase, "A controlled woman is a beautiful one." And in our world, beauty wasn't just aesthetic, it was survival currency. The men didn't need to raise their hands, their eyes were sharper. Their words landed harder. "No man wants a wife who takes up too much space," they'd say over dinner, while we chewed on lettuce and pretended to smile. "Discipline is love." Submission is grace. Over time, we began to confuse the two. But now, their kingdom was cracking. I found Brad's backup drive tucked behind a box of tax records in our basement, password protected, but his pattern hadn't changed since 8th grade, the initials of his favorite Marvel characters. Within seconds, I was inside folders dated by week, screenshots of chat logs, videos of weigh-ins, and most damning, a clip of Uncle Reese instructing his daughter to cry quietly, or you'll make your brothers think you're weak. I could barely breathe watching it. This wasn't just punishment. It was grooming. Cult-like indoctrination passed down as if it were tradition. I backed it all up, twice. The next day, I handed it to Mrs. Chin. She didn't speak, just placed a trembling hand on mine, nodded, and locked the door behind me. Within 72 hours, everything ignited. Subpoenas hit mailboxes like unexpected storms. Social workers, now armed with documentation, began unannounced visits. School counselors were brought in for interviews. A medical examiner reviewed records and declared our malnourishment criminal neglect. And for the first time, a word we'd never dared say aloud was written in ink: abuse. The men panicked. They held family meetings, urged us to stay silent for the sake of unity. My father paced the living room, voice slick with performance. "This is how the world destroys strong families," he warned. "They call tradition abuse because they don't understand discipline." I met his eyes and said clearly, "Discipline doesn't lock girls in closets. It doesn't make 11-year-olds afraid of breakfast." He slapped the table, not me, but the sound was enough to make my little cousin cry. She clung to my leg, whispering, "Don't let them take me back there. Please." I promised her I wouldn't, and I meant it. Then came the lawyers, not ours, theirs. Men in tailored suits and shark smile grins. They spun everything overzealous parenting, cultural misunderstandings, emotional daughters inventing stories. But the video footage didn't lie, nor did the nurse reports, nor did the scars on Peggy's wrist from trying to carve herself into someone small enough to be loved. The court hearings began. The courtroom felt too small to hold so many secrets. We sat on one side, girls with sunken cheeks and sharpened spines, while the men sat across, suddenly looking older, smaller, out of place in a world that wouldn't bend to their rules. One by one, we took the stand. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I told everything. About the weigh-ins, the starvation, the rooms, the lies. I told them about the hidden phones, the backup drives, the bribes and threats. I told them about Brad and how even betrayal can birth resistance. When I finished, the judge didn't say anything for a long moment, just sat there, staring at my father. And then he asked, "Is this what you call leadership?" My father's face cracked. He didn't speak. The ruling was swift. Protective orders were issued, custody was reallocated, mandatory counseling was enforced, and the punishment rooms, every door, every bolt, every lock, were dismantled, publicly, brick by brick, so the community could witness what had been hidden behind drywall and denial. It wasn't enough to erase what had happened, but it was the beginning of something bigger than revenge. It was justice. In the aftermath, we were placed with different families, some of us reunited with maternal relatives, others with counselors who specialized in recovering from authoritarian households. The sewing circle became virtual, a quiet rebellion that never truly ended. We stitched from different homes now, sometimes different states, not just fabric, but memory, resilience, truth, and slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild the shape of womanhood outside of the scales. You never realize how many pieces of yourself have gone missing until someone looks you in the eye and says, "You're safe now," and your first instinct is to flinch. After the trial, the dust didn't settle, not really. It just shifted. The headlines came fast and shallow: discipline or abuse, local families under fire. Girls allege, weight cult, behind closed doors. They all wanted the shock, not the sorrow. They didn't know what it meant to hold hunger like a secret, or sleep with one ear tuned to the sound of footsteps outside your door. The system placed me with a temporary guardian, a retired school librarian named Eliza who smelled like cinnamon and old books. She didn't ask questions, didn't force small talk, just gave me a room, a journal, and time. But silence in freedom feels different than silence in captivity. At first, I couldn't sleep. My body had been trained to survive surveillance. Now, without it, I didn't know what to be. One night, I asked Eliza, "What happens to people like them, my father? The others?" She closed her book slowly, eyes unreadable. "Some learn. Most rot. All face themselves eventually, one way or another." I wanted that to be enough. I wanted punishment to heal. But it doesn't. Justice is not a time machine. It doesn't unstarve you. It doesn't untangle the guilt you carry when your sister lost more hair than you did, or when you got the bigger slice of apple and didn't protest. But healing isn't about forgetting. I returned to school 6 weeks later. Not the same school, a new one, with teachers who didn't know my name or my history. That anonymity felt like luxury. My body was still fragile, and my weight fluctuated wildly, but the difference was no one measured it. No one watched me eat. Until one day, I caught a girl in the restroom, 16, probably, bent over the sink, shaking. I knew that posture. I knew that shame. I walked past her at first, then I turned back. I sat on the floor outside her stall and whispered, "You don't owe anyone smallness." She didn't answer, but she didn't purge either. That was the first time I understood what survival was meant to become. Not just your own escape, but your reach, your ability to stand at the edge of someone else's cliff and whisper, "You don't have to jump." In time, the others re-emerged, too. My cousin, who live-streamed our captivity, she'd been placed with a foster couple who enrolled her in a teen advocacy group. She emailed me a link one night. "Thought you might like this. We're organizing a panel. Survivor-led." I clicked. There were 12 of us. Girls from different homes, different cities. But the stories were terrifyingly similar. Different rules, same walls, different justifications, same silencing. Fathers, uncles, church elders, even female enforcers, all using tradition, religion, discipline as cloaks. One of the girls, Cassie from Nevada, said something that lodged in my chest. They never saw us as daughters, just products of obedience, measured, trained, displayed, like livestock with lipstick. We decided to make it public. No aliases, no pseudonyms, just truth, raw, uncut, stitched together by memory and pain. We called it the Unweighted Project, a digital archive of testimonies, photos, journal scans, audio confessions, a living graveyard of silence finally exhumed. Within weeks, we were flooded with submissions. A girl from Oklahoma uploaded a recording of her father forcing her to run laps in the backyard at midnight after gaining 2 pounds. A teenager from Boston shared photos of her prayer closet, which doubled as a lock-in punishment chamber. A woman in her 30s wrote, "I didn't realize I was abused until I heard your story. I just thought I was fat and unloved." It spread like wildfire, not viral in the trendy sense, but contagious in the way truth always is once someone dares to name it. And that's when the media circled back. They wanted interviews, sound bites, digestible trauma. Tell us about the starvation. Was there physical abuse? What was the worst thing that happened? But we weren't interested in selling spectacle. We were building testimony. So we curated our own documentary, directed by us, edited by survivors. No scripts, no pity filters. Just reality, uncomfortably clear. We called it Weighed Down the Girls They Tried to Shrink, premiered it online, shared it with counselors, schools, universities, sent it to lawmakers, foundations, therapists in training. And slowly, ever so slowly, policies began to change. Mandatory reporting protocols expanded. Wellness programs in schools included trauma-informed assessments. Even social media platforms started flagging thinspo content that mirrored our past lives too closely. And my father, he appealed. Of course he did. Claimed coercion, misunderstanding, blamed my mother, blamed media, blamed me. The court denied him. Last I heard, he lives in a small apartment 3 states away. No contact, no visitors. Sometimes I still wonder if he ever steps on a scale and flinches. If he ever looks at his reflection and sees not a patriarch, but a tyrant. I doubt it. But I no longer need his change to validate my own. Because I am no longer something to be weighed, trimmed, or displayed. I am the fire they forgot to factor in. They eventually tore down the old house. A crew of men with no knowledge of its history arrived one morning with cranes and crowbars, tearing through walls that once held our silence like sacred scripture. The punishment room, that narrow, lightless tomb where my mother once whispered apologies to the dark, fell in under 30 minutes. Just drywall, they said. Just a storage closet. But we knew what it really was, a graveyard of girlhoods. We watched from a hill nearby, bundled in jackets despite the spring air. My sister stood beside me, arms crossed tightly, and whispered, "Does it feel like enough?" I shook my head. But it feels like something. The rubble was hauled away, the land listed for sale, and eventually a new family moved in. I hoped they'd plant trees where the scales used to sit, hoped their children would run barefoot through the halls without flinching at shadows or the sound of doors closing. I hoped they'd never measure love in pounds or punishment. And in a way, that hope was the final rebellion. Over the next year, the Unweighted Project evolved beyond what any of us had imagined. We partnered with therapists, teachers, youth advocates, people who understood that abuse wasn't always bruises, that sometimes it came with good lighting and polite language. We launched school workshops. We created a crisis line specifically for teens trapped in systems of family control masquerading as discipline. But more than that, we made space, real space. We opened a small house outside Chicago, funded by grants and quiet donations, where girls like us could come stay. Not a shelter, not an institution, just a home, with warmth, with food, with locked doors that could only be locked from the inside. We named it the Room to Breathe. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood on the front steps, surrounded by women who had once slept on concrete floors to avoid punishment, who had once gone 3 days without food to appease their fathers. Now they stood tall, laughing, holding hands, wearing whatever the hell they wanted. In the crowd, I spotted Eliza, the retired librarian who gave me my first room of peace. She smiled and nodded, as if to say, "This is what survival is supposed to look like." And I believed her. The last person I expected to hear from was Brad. He emailed me 6 months after the court ruling. Subject line, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask for forgiveness. Just told the truth. Said he still wakes up hearing the click of locks. Said he's in therapy now, working to unlearn the myth that obedience makes men holy. Said he watches the documentary every year on the date we were rescued. Not as penance, but as a reminder. He ended the message like this: "I didn't save you, but you saved me. If you ever need help with the project, I have skills. Real ones. You don't have to say yes. I wanted you to know that I remember." I never replied. Not because I hate him. I don't. But because some bridges are meant to stay ash. Still, I left his message unread in the inbox. A seed. Maybe. Something I might water later. Now. When I lie down at night, there's no fear that I'll wake up to someone demanding I undress and step on a scale. There's no checklist of tricks to fake my own thinness. No hidden phones. No sewn-in codes beneath embroidery. There's just quiet. And in that quiet, I think about the girls who haven't escaped yet, the ones still swallowing celery in shame, still watching their mothers thank their fathers with trembling hands. To them, I say, "You are not disobedient for wanting to be fed. You are not broken because you cannot shrink anymore. And you are not alone. Because we're out here. We survived. We are many. We are loud. And we've built a room with your name on it. A room with light, with warmth, with space. A room that does not ask you to be smaller. A room where you can finally breathe.